Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of TNM Coaching Unplugged, your go-to podcast for insight, for inspiration, for real conversation with real leaders who are here to inspire you to take yourself to the next level and beyond. This is one of these elevations that we're going to look into a topic that deserves a lot of credit and a lot of emphasis, but not so many people are talking about it nowadays, which is project management excellence in non-profit sector. I'm your host, Zoran Todorovic, and I'm really grateful and happy to have this wonderful guest joining us today, Rasmus Jakobsen. I'm so thrilled to have him because we were making this podcast for quite some time, and then we were coming and going, and finally we managed to find the moment together, and here he is with us. Rasmus is Chief Executive Officer of Care Denmark. He's also Executive Board Member of Danish Refugee Council. He has more than 15 years of experience in managing, developing humanitarian programs across conflicts, field operations, headquarter roles. He brings a wealth of knowledge and strategic insight. Through his career, Rasmus has overseen international affairs, development aid, humanitarian work, climate justice initiatives. His background also includes extensive training in management, gender sensitivity, human rights, safety, accountability, organizational change, and media relations. Rasmus, it's a privilege to have you on TNM Coaching Unplugged. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks, Sonia. Thanks a lot for inviting me. As you were saying, we've been having such a good discussion for a long time, so I'm happy finally to be here.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful to have you because a lot of people can be inspired and learn from you. So to start with our conversation, I'm really curious about your life, like what got you into the nonprofit world and what was your journey into that? How did you arrive being where you are nowadays?
Yeah, thanks for that, Son. And I think really my journey started as an intern, to be honest, slightly confused and not knowing exactly what to do. And I got an internship with the Danish Refugee Council. And that for me really was a key that sort of unlocked a lot in terms of my interest and also where I found that the things that I felt good at was being utilized. And I think also it was sort of a place where I was very quickly given a lot of responsibility. And that was just very, very exciting for me at that point in time and in my very early days of my career. And then that sort of internship became a student job, and that student job became an employment that led to my first sort of post abroad and so on. So, then one step sort of one incident or one event sort of took the other. So I felt like sort of always that I sort of been following my how can we say, sort of my motivation, my energy, and sort of where I felt that there were sort of positive people and sort of exciting opportunities without really having had sort of a very clear career path ever sort of in my life. So I think it's also a lot of lucky coincidence for me, but certainly sort of something about being attracted to where the good energy is, where I felt sort of strong colleagues, an organization that I felt had sort of a strong brand and did some excellent work, and certainly, of course, the role for me and the job in it. But it's been an interesting journey, certainly.
Yeah, and if, for me, somebody who kind of follows its own life path, so to say, because it feels like life was happening to you, the career was unfolding in front of you. So then, in a way, you're meant to be there. Do you feel like that as well? Do you feel this was your just?
Yeah, somehow. I mean, somehow, because I am feeling that. Of course, I've had. I think, like many of us, sort of had the occasional holiday where I'm sort of contemplating doing something completely different. I should have opened that cafe, or I should have done something very different. But when I am sort of truly honest with myself, I feel like I am in the right place. It's sort of in the right moment for me. Sort of. Given my career, looking back and also looking forward, I truly do feel that I'm sort of that I'm using what I'm good at, and certainly very many things that I'm not good at. But I think in this sort of particular sector and this particular job, I'm lucky to sort of get to use sort of the best sides of me, and that's of course extremely motivating.
Yeah, and you mentioned, action, you mentioned engagement, you mentioned that in this line of work, which is a non-profit, there is a lot of putting people into the fire, so to say, and people then just working and operating and executing. So what was the most challenging, situation you found yourself in. If you think about your field work, if you think about your humanitarian work, if you think about your showing up in different situations, in different conflicts, can you share with us something that kind of stands up for you as one of the most challenging things that you needed to live in your professional life?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think that there's so many. I think one a couple comes to mind. I was sort of immediately thinking, sort of back in the early days of my career, where I also had less experience, and I was more, how can we say, more easily sort of overwhelmed and overtaken by what I was visiting in South Sudan and in Somalia and some of these places that I'm traveling to and doing projects. And there's certainly been, I think, examples there in the early days of the split between Sudan and South Sudan and independence of South Sudan, that where I felt sort of in deep waters, both in terms of my sort of my own safety, but also in terms of what can we do here? Is there at all sort of a moment in time or sort of a pocket of calm where we have an opportunity to sort of really engage and make change? But I think also actually, when I started here in Denmark, this has been such an exciting job for me in so many ways. I've been the CEO for 7 years. It has been sort of a very transformative. The task was a bit of a sort of a U-turn. We needed something new. We needed some fresh blood. The board was in agreement, and I've basically been busy trying to sort of turn around Care Denmark for the last 7 years, and I think slowly we're succeeding and becoming sort of an organization which is fit for the future. But this last journey of 7 years has actually been one of the more inspiring ones in my career, I think.
That's lovely to hear, and lovely to hear that you get this mandate to turn it around. So if you think about your job as a CEO and turning around and transforming the organization, and it feels like you're nearly there, what are some of the key contributing factors they have enabled you and your team, your organization, to turn this corner and to show up and in a different light?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's a good question, Zoran. And of course, I'd sort of been contemplating, but I think it has been important for me in the beginning of this turnaround project, as I guess it is for all of us. You're alone. You're the only one, maybe with a chair, who's sort of given you the mandate or the task. But pretty much in terms of your staff and your colleagues, you're on your own. You have an idea, you have a plan, and from there on, it has been, for me at least, it has been to be very true to that plan and stick to it. And that has certainly had its toll. I mean, sort of mentally throughout, and it has been certainly very, very challenging, and at the same time very motivating and inspiring. But certainly one element has been sort of sticking true to my core plan and to sort of the idea and the vision that I had for where we were going to get to. That has meant certainly changes in staff. It has meant periods in moments in time where very little has happened, and we've spent a lot of time in the organization discussing, arguing, also disagreeing. At the end, sort of, but taking that time to sort of. I mean, essentially, it's a change management project, isn't it? So, everything about sort of establishing a clear vision. Where do we want to go? Making sure that vision is appealing to staff, but certainly also gives answers to the problems that we're here to solve, and the problems that we can sort of see in the years to come, looking ahead. So we sort of have a vision that also seems fit for the future. And then I think it's been a lot of dialogue. It's been a lot about getting the right people in, and then slowly, also leading by, so how can we say, sort of thinking big, but also acting small. So some good concrete examples that have been able to somehow act as lighthouse projects. Look, this is it. This is an example. This is an example of what we would like to do more of. look at this. This is a concrete way that we work together around this project that really worked, and where we worked in a new way, in the way that we want to do more of in the future. So also zooming in on those lighthouses and those sort of moments of success that can inspire us, but certainly also learning from our failures throughout. So the whole sort of notion of establishing sort of a deeper learning culture has also been very important.
So many elements there, from the learning culture to lighthouse to the project, keeping the strategy, but at the same time focusing on the details and really directing your energy in this transformation. And then that kind of gently brings us into this topic of our conversation today, which is this project excellence. And this is what I really wanted to talk to you about, like through this transformation and you being able to lead your organization into the success. You also mentioned that this efficient project management excellence, especially in the nonprofit sector, it's crucially important. So how did you get into that? What is your passion for project management? And share with us, why was that instrumental and crucial element of you driving your organization into success and forward?
Yeah. And I think firstly for me, and I've sort of been contemplating with this sort of notion of nonprofit for a while, and there was actually a colleague that wrote something interesting a while ago on LinkedIn that I really took note of, where she challenged that, saying, "Is that really a good way for for defining ourselves?" And I agree with her that it's not. For me, I mean, nonprofit. It explains what we are not. It doesn't explain what we are. More than anything, really, it's a tax, isn't it? It's a tax issue. It's not really has something to do with what we are trying to do. It explains that we reinvest the money back, but it doesn't explain our business model. And I've been sort of focusing on also creating a different kind of culture and a different kind of awareness in my organization that took more seriously who we are and what it is we do. We do social change. We aim for social impact. We attract the very best people, not only in the sector, not only in the industry, but in the market. And we are able to, because of our strong purpose, we are able to attract the smartest people in the country. We have measure financial management that equals the best corporates in the world. We can measure our impact, and so on and so forth. So we are a highly sophisticated, highly capable organization delivering social impact. So I think that's sort of an initial recognition that that I really sort of wanted my colleagues to take in. And part of that is then also to be much more considerate, much more careful, and much more deliberate in how we then do social change, which then sort of leads us to the focus on project management. So our entire business model, of course, it focuses on the impact. That's sort of our end result. That's what we want to achieve. That's where we want to go. We are challenged by lack of resources. Very difficult to make these types of organizations run. Very low profit margins in what we do. Very low sort of overhead that we can sort of tax on the different donors. So very restricted on financing. Working in very sort of changeable, contextual, difficult environments, for example, like South Sudan or Somalia or others. So meaning there's actually making our sort of business model and our sort of projects even more complicated than so many other projects that you could look at, and hence even more important that we are super careful and highly careful in our project management, because of course also in our sector, any kind of lack, any kind of any delays, any waste of financing that could happen sort of throughout a project, meaning unmet needs, meaning that there's people on the other end who will not be reached by the impact, who will not achieve this sort of social impact that we're looking for. And that simply is not our mandate, and that's not what we're here to do. And that's a sort of also a narrative for ourselves that we simply cannot afford. So really sort of being very, very careful and very deliberate, both in understanding who we are, that is what we do. We do projects that deliver social impact, and then also being super deliberate in terms of then also, careful on the dollar. I was about to say that we have that we are doing everything we possibly can to reduce waste.
Yeah. And I love when you're describing the business model, I love the sophistication behind this. And I love this analogy that sometimes people are standing not profit and we are not for profit, but at the same time, the mechanics within the organization and the impact that you need to deliver requires you to be super organized, very deliberate, very cost efficient, working on the small margin and delivering the impact that you said to do. But for that, we need some kind of organizational project excellence, right? Otherwise, the impact that the organization is set to deliver will not be present and available, correct? So this is something that I'm hearing from you that really drove you to focus on that. How can you get your team and yourself to become brilliant in project excellence to be able to deliver an impact, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how did it go, in your project management kind of life and journey in your organization? The questions are like for the people who are curious about this, listening and thinking about, we would love to do the same. Every time we invite a guest, we want to inspire people to consider your experience in your work life within your industry and sector, and then inspire everybody else to consider doing something like that. So when it comes to your project management, for the nonprofit organization, so what were, for example, the obstacles that you needed to overcome, and how did you get this rolling? How did you put it into place so that you have these systems and processes in place to be able to deliver on impact?
Yeah. And I think that, certainly sort of in terms of the obstacles, I think that, as I mentioned, some of the challenges really when we do projects would be this about sort of our constant sort of resource constraint. So a constant lack of financing, and there's no, how can we say? I mean, we don't have sort of means that we can simply just add a little bit more to make something work. We don't have that additional, that add-on that could go in and smoothen things out a little bit. I think also we have, in pretty much all of our projects, a very complex sort of stakeholder dynamic. So we're working with, for example, a back donor like the European Union, a very complex donor with tons of compliance requirements, with institutions, for example, I mean, keeping the focus on South Sudan with a fragile government, with a couple of local partners, and so on and so forth. So a very complex sort of stakeholder pattern that we need to sort of gather around a project and a project model and a way of implementing that project that is then can be sort of perceived very, very difficult by different by the various stakeholders in the project. And then lastly, sort of on the context that this is something that can change. The project can be erupted by uncertain events at any given time. Can be a war, can be an earthquake, can be whatever that might sort of come in and really sort of disrupt our project. So I think that some of what we looked at to sort of counter some of that has been, sort of really maintaining a strategic focus, getting the stakeholders around saying this is, I mean, the focus on the big impact, the social change that we are trying to do, recognizing that the path to get there will not only can, but will certainly change, but really sort of putting in an effort and putting in time on getting alignment behind that and making sure that what that is also is highly important and fits well with the different stakeholders' various missions. So that there needs to be that very strong common denominator and sort of wish and want for this to succeed. So that's certainly one of it, one of the core elements. And then this about setting up sort of a very adaptable system, a very agile way of working together, where we can mix between sort of having a fairly structured project management sort of initial setup to being much more iterative, to being much more agile as we move along. So we can be flexible and show flexibility, for example, on milestones within a fairly fixed sort of project management governance structure and Gantt charts and what have you, but then allowing ourselves and have built in from the beginning that then, for example, on reaching milestones, we give ourselves that flexibility. And then I think building capacity as we move along. So recognizing all of these different stakeholders and making sure that while certainly keeping an eye on the project, that we also keep an eye on how we work together, uh, and that we sort of have that common understanding of the framework that guides our common work. And if it's not there, that we then sort of take a pause and take a time out and make sure that we sort of understand each other and explain to each other how is it that we would like to sort of govern this project. So I think those would be some of the highlights in terms of I mean both challenges and then also some of the means that we are applying and again to overcome those challenges, but really recognizing that I'm hoping that I'm not making it sound too easy, because it's not, and often we don't succeed, but that's at least what we are trying to do.
I was just thinking about business leaders in the profit sector, when you were mentioning, flexibility between the structure and how we balance the structure and managing the projects alongside with adaptability, agility, costs that are not being able to challenge. A lot of the organizations nowadays are struggling with the same issues. There's even with the very profitable organizations, they became cost conscientious, especially last year. And people do not have luxury any longer to open up the budgets and to get things done in that way. So this whole mastery of being able to be agile, flexible, adaptable, to really, work with the excellence of the tools, but be flexible in the moment and adapt, it's something really important. And then also you mentioned the stakeholders management and capacity. I think that a lot of businesses are in a position when we're decentralizing, and a lot of big organizations are also working within the project teams, focusing on the specific milestones, while they need to be in relationship with different stakeholders and manage expectations, and also inviting into collaborations. So that's another amazing clue that you're sharing, that this is also important for all of us to understand. So there's a lot to learn from this. And I love that you're saying that, some projects are successful and some are not, because sometimes when we have leaders and people, in conversation, we always project this image of success, that everything that we do, it's always amazing, and successful. And we need to be also, authentic, that, we do our best, right? And then some initiatives really accelerate, and some initiatives we need to move on and reinvent ourselves and do them again, right? So I really honor and value your authenticity, and thank you so much for that.
And so, and I think on that, we're of course spending, as we spoke about a little bit earlier, spending some time sort of really trying to sort of install this learning culture. Talk about a growth mindset in my organization also. And growth is not at all in financial terms only, but it's about sort of being curious and wanting to learn, both from what works and certainly what doesn't work. And when we are sort of looking at when we fail and when we're not sort of really delivering, oftentimes I think we are finding ourselves sort of way back to in the very beginning of the project start, and how careful we were and how much time we actually sort of spent in that moment in time. Um, on some of the details actually, and being sort of more careful and more deliberate on some of the details in the project, in terms of costing them, in terms of figuring out how many hours do we actually need, Rasmus, to do that job. And so if the fewer details and the less carefulness in the beginning is going to harm us when we move ahead in the project, because then all of a sudden, things starts to fall a little bit apart, and I can't finish that job on that deadline because actually it was going to take a little bit more money and a little bit more time and whatnot. So there's something there, and we see that as sort of a recurring thing in our projects, and I think you will get that from literature also. But even though that but we also find ourselves falling straight into that pit, even though that it's well described, we're sort of doing it and saying, hang on, and of course it has to do with many things. It has to do with, sometimes in our sector, the speediness of how we need to deliver things. So there's a new situation in Syria as we speak. We want to be fast. We want to be quick, out of the blocks, respond, help Syrians return, and so on and so forth. And then oftentimes, our concepts are written on 2 pages, and then we know. But then, of course, we know that things will end up in a very different place from when we started. But no. So certainly we also failed. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it's good. And again, once again, good to know, good for people and for listening to have this understanding, because a lot of the time, this compulsion that we all need to be perfect, we all need to deliver all the time, we all need to succeed is actually not a human trait. Human beings, we need to learn from our mistakes, we need to learn from our actions, we need to try and fail and then learn again. And I think giving people permission to create this growth culture, the essence is also learning from your mistakes. And I'm really grateful that you as a CEO have a level of consciousness that is recognizing that the growth culture is the most important element of successful culture that then can deliver on the projects, that can deliver on the impact with agility and perseverance. So how did you came to that consciousness? What happened to you as a CEO to say, wow, I need to have a growth culture in my organization. This is so important. Did you have an insight? Did you have an experience, or did you learn it from somebody else? How did you manage to get there?
I think really sort of speaking to people, from that I have felt were cleverer than me in and were able to sort of challenge me, including yourself, Zoran, and some of the conversations that we have that could sort of come in and offer me a bit of sort of an outside in look at my organization and my role in it, and how I was a good CEO, and how I could sort of help, or work with culture, and cultural change, which is of course we all know, very very difficult, and not at all easy, but sort of come in with some outside in perspectives on how that could be done. So also, I think sort of challenging myself to sort of explore experiences outside my sector and outside my sort of own immediate, how can we say, sort of realm of confidence, or what I felt I was so challenging myself a little bit with sort of new and fresh perspectives. So I think really it's something that so it's not something that I feel that I can sort of take credit for on my own, but where I really feel that other people have inspired me, and also sort of enlightened me, and given me some new insights that I've felt could be really valuable.
So, and what speaks to you as a character, it's that you were open as a CEO. You were open to consider, you were open to learn, you were open to, engage, yeah, and not just stay like a lot of the CEO can stay with, this is my kingdom, this is my domain, this is my industry, this is what I'm good at. You opened up to learn from others, and therefore grew yourself and brought this growth to the organization, because I think that's super important. A lot of the times, organizations talk about project excellence, agility, flexibility, execution, but they don't talk about the growth and the capacity, of really educating people to be able to do their job well. And if they grow, if they develop, if they learn, then they will be able to, right?
Yeah. And I think also for me, it has been then, so one has been and that's of course an important start, that I'm sort of getting some, how can we say, some recognitions and realizations, and some new insights, but then also sharing that with my colleagues. And I think sometimes, I mean, we have lots of privileges sort of at the executive level, but in this particular case, I think and in other cases as well, but particularly in this case, it's so important that that is shared. Most of my colleagues, pretty much all of them, has a role to play in helping us improve our project management, from finance to administration to our program managers and so on and so forth. So they need it also. So it was really sort of also, how do I share this, and how can I also, in an affordable way, being non-profit and so on, how can I really sort of make this something that is being shared more widely in the organization? Hence the cultural issue, but also when it comes down to some practical tools, some trainings in project management, and so on and so forth. So that was sort of a little bit the sequencing of it also, and that of course isn't sort of is a journey that will never end. We will have to continue. To the extent that I'm really hoping that this can also sort of become a little bit of an attraction and a brand for my organization, that you would maybe not get the highest and highest of salaries, but when you leave, you would be an excellent project manager. So also making that sort of a point of attraction for coming to work with me in this organization.
Exactly. And I'm sure the people are already feeling it, because when you have that skill and competence in your toolkit, then you can really execute and create and manage and deliver. And as I said, and this is the reason why I'm emphasizing, for the bigger organization that I'm coaching right now, I can see the trend is changing, that a lot of the organizations are operating within the smaller project management teams that are being tasked to execute on a specific outcome or a specific income, and they need to be brilliant project managers. So you're absolutely right that people come to work with you and they know they will be able to become a good project managers, good project leaders. They have excellent skill set. They will be able to show up in any situation in their life and in their work with that skill and accomplish a lot. Because if we know, and I know, if the foundation of project management is done well, then we can carry out a lot of initiatives that you have been talked about so far. So it's a very important skill, and thank you so much for that. So as we're wrapping up our podcast today, Rasmus, I just want to be grateful for your wisdom, for your inspiration, for your sharing your experience with us. I think it's super inspiring for people to hear from you. I really hope that people who are listening will feel the attraction and come and support you in your organization and your endeavors, of course, not only working for you, but also donating and becoming sponsors and creating more capacity for you to create impact. So how would you love to leave audience with? Anything that you would love to share, anything, any call for action, anything that comes naturally for you to wrap up this dialogue with today?
Thanks a lot, Zoran, and thanks for a very interesting conversation, as always. No, I think we've spoken a lot, and without having sort of a pre-script for that, but this about our culture and really sort of fostering that learning culture. And I think that that's very relevant for the. I mean, it's not a coincidence that that's sort of where we are ending up spending most of our conversation, because it's highly, highly important. So I think really sort of underlining and emphasizing that. And maybe another couple of sort of two, or maybe one more reflection. This about sort of to get started somehow, but thinking big and acting small. I think hopefully I mentioned it earlier on in our conversation, but sort of can understand as a CEO and you want to do something, but how do we start? And you have the big plan, you know where to go, but how to get started? And I think it's absolutely fair, and it's not only fair, but it's a very good idea to start small, to focus in on a project, or focus in on a process, and then grow from there. That sounds like, I guess that's an advice that has worked for me. And then and then maybe leaving it there. But thanks a lot, Zoran.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for your advice and for your inspiration once again. Rasmus, lovely to have you. Rasmus, CEO of Care Denmark, joined us today. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to TNM Unplugged podcast. We're really grateful for growth and for you sharing this podcast with your loved ones, with your colleagues and partners. A lot of people are reporting that they're having valuable lessons to this podcast, so we're super grateful to our loyal audience for following us and being part of this community. Thank you so much once again, everybody, for joining in and listening. And Rasmus, have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise, sir.